The Wisconsin Veterans Museum is dedicated to the people of Wisconsin who served in the armed forces. Wisconsin service members have been collecting souvenirs since the Civil War. Follow us today as we visit the temporary exhibit located at the Wisconsin Veterans Museum in Madison, Wisconsin. The Wisconsin Veterans Museum has free admission. You can find more information at wisvetsmuseum.com. I will post the information in the description box below. On November 21, 1944, First Lieutenant Dick Steiner's B-29 was attacked over Japan. Though badly damaged, the crew members managed to keep the B-29 airborne long enough to cross the China Sea and bail out over Japanese-occupied territory. After being rescued by local farmers and smuggled back to safety, Steiner mailed his life-saving parachute to Magill in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, with the request that she use the material to make a dress for herself. Magill and her friends carefully took apart the panels so the cloth could be reused. With the assistance of an experienced dressmaker, as well as a rug maker who taught her how to braid the shoulder straps out of the parachute cords, Magill's evening dress was completed in 1945. She had a portrait taken of her in the dress and mailed it off to her husband in India, who carried the photograph on him for the remainder of his tour. In a skirmish just before the First Battle of Bull Run in July of 1861, Myron Gardner of La Crosse was killed by this solid-shot cannonball near Blackburn's Ford in Virginia. It was the 2nd Wisconsin Voluntary Infantry's first time under fire. The first encounter so affected Gardner's comrades in Company B, the La Crosse Light Guard, that they retrieved the projectile, known to have killed him and wounded 2 others. Company B gave the cannonball to one of the congressmen from Wisconsin to send to La Crosse, but he passed it to General Rufus King of Milwaukee instead. King sent the cannonball to Milwaukee with the intent of it eventually making its way to the state archives in Madison. There was such an outcry from the men of Company B because their wishes were ignored that it finally was sent to the newspaper offices in La Crosse for display. Ultimately, it found its way to the possession of Myron Gardner's sister, who donated it to the state in 1888. During his time as lieutenant, Rufus King of Milwaukee received these buckskin trousers from the famed soldier-turned-showman William Buffalo Bill Cody while serving on the Western Plains with the 5th Cavalry during the 1875 Sioux War. In 1927, King mentioned his good friend's gift. It was the only souvenir I ever had of our days scouting and campaigning together. Among many other accomplishments, General King would go on to write the scripts for Buffalo Bill, who turned them into silent films that documented their historical exploits on the western frontier. 5 months before his 18th birthday, Reuben B. Lewis of Waupaca enlisted into Company C of the 4th Wisconsin Infantry. As the youngest man on the Wisconsin National Guard unit, Lewis served as bugler while they began training for service for World War I. The unit eventually became part of the 32nd Infantry Division, going overseas in February 1918. Lewis later transferred to the 32nd Division Military Police Company and remained in Europe during the occupation of Germany. During this time, a fellow member of Company C acquired this bottle of Remley Martin and Company cognac. Later became the centerpiece of every meeting held by those that went on for the next Company C veteran reunion group. According to the label on the bottom, the members made a pact in the early 1940s that the contents of this last man's club bottle were to be consumed by the last 5 men remaining from the company. The bottle was saved until 1986, at which point the last members, including Lewis, drank from the 70-year-old cognac. 2 years later, Lewis passed away at the age of 88. Milwaukee resident Seaman Second Class Erwin Zerbel joined the U.S. Navy Reserve on June 5, 1918, going to serve aboard the troop transport ship USS Amagemin, a confiscated German passenger ship. This passenger ship was originally the Kaiser Wilhelm II, which was on a voyage from Germany to New York when war broke out in 1914. The ship made several trips between the United States and France during and immediately after the war. While serving, Zerbel and a buddy scavenged and collected ink to complete the illustrations and writing on the bag documenting all the places he was stationed or ships served abroad over the course of the war. Here is what they called a hate belt with German and Allied insignia. It was collected by Sparta resident Robert C. McCogg, 107th Ammunition Train, 32nd Division. This belt also has a belt buckle lighter, which is inscribed in German, stating, "God with us." This photograph is at Camp Douglas from Duke E. Jones. These guys look like they had a great day fishing. Photo from Ernest L. Nilsson. Riding the Elephant from Robert E. Phillips. Photo in front of the swastika from Norris L. Tibbetts, Jr. Photos from the scrapbook of Marie R. Coutts. In 1943, 18-year-old Harold Brown of Madison, Wisconsin, arrived in England to be a replacement pilot on a P-47 aircraft. Shortly after his arrival, he witnessed a German air raid while on a 3-day pass in London. As he stood on the street, a local woman urged him to get indoors and out of danger. After spending the night, she gave Brown what he described as a Raggedy Ann doll the next morning. She wrote her name Irene across the face, followed by happy landings across the chest. She assured him that he would never get shot down and would survive his upcoming missions. Believing it to be a lucky token, Carroll kept the doll in the dresser next to his cot throughout his tour and indeed safely completed 67 combat missions. Even after he returned stateside, he continued to keep the doll in his dresser drawer, believing it had saved his life during the war. Second Lieutenant William Sherrick of Lodi, Wisconsin, served in Italy during World War II. At the start of the Rome-Arno campaign, officers in his unit succeeded in an unusual attempt to order Hercules brand horsehide jackets directly from the Sears Roebuck Company mail order catalog and have them delivered in the field at Monte Cristo in Italy. An act of pure bravado, the men kept their newly acquired coats blackened and shined, proudly wearing them as part of their uniform. Lieutenant William Bessler of Marshfield, Wisconsin, served during World War I. As a fluent German speaker and writer, he was transferred to the intelligence section of the 1st Army headquarters and assigned to a prison interrogating German prisoners. He collected the shoulder straps from the uniforms for the purpose of unit identification training for the other intelligence officers. Every time Bessler saw a new style of strap, he removed both, sending one on and keeping the other for himself. His shoulder strap souvenirs were carefully arranged and sewn together into this wall hanging. Most of the 104 seen here came from German infantry field regiments. Some of the more colorful ones originate from German field and foot artillery battalions, as well as Austrian and Hungarian troops. Chester, or Chet Budish, showed a keen sense in souvenir collecting while serving as an artilleryman in World War II. As his unit fought through Holland in the fall of 1944, the Milwaukee resident looked everywhere for a pair of wooden shoes to send home. He finally asked a clog-wearing bicyclist where he could buy a single pair. The bicyclist responded by giving Budish the shoes directly off his feet. Later, after Budish was wounded by friendly fire in Belgium that November, during his transfer to the hospital in France, Budish took the advantage of time stuck in Paris traffic in an overcrowded ambulance to ask the driver to get out and purchase an Eiffel Tower statuette for him to bring home. Byron Parfrey of Richland Center was sent to Korea in the spring of 1951. A missile seriously wounded him during action on May 22nd of 1951. That August, Parfrey had a brief layover in Tokyo while he was being transported to Tripler Army Medical Center in Honolulu. Anxious to find a fashionable tour jacket for himself, he opted for this Western wear-influenced model. After World War II, Fireman Second Class Stanley Thatcher from Wapaka, Wisconsin, served aboard the destroyer USS Lofberg. He was clearing mines along the China coast. For a 19-year-old sailor, the region made quite an impression. He had this custom shirt made as a memento of his time in Shanghai. Toward the end of World War II, Grafton resident Albert Nunfeld worked as a supervisor at a fox farm located in Mequon. Part of his job included transporting German prisoners of war, known as PWs, from Camp Billy Mitchell in Milwaukee to be day laborers building fox huts on the farm. A fluent speaker of German, Nunfeld befriended a prisoner of war named Kurt Buttner. They grew so close that Albert and his wife Lillian visited Buttner in his hometown in Germany after the war. The men also wrote letters to each other for the rest of their lives. As a memento of their friendship, Buttner gave Nunfeld the U.S. Army denim jacket he wore while laboring on the farm. To manage the brutal weather, Chaplain Harold Barr constructed this cold weather parka. In preparation for his August 68 to November 1969 assignment in Antarctica, when the Oshkosh native arrived at the U.S. Research Station, it had been over 10 years since the first United States Research Task Force, codenamed Operation Deep Freeze, was sent to Antarctica. His parka is embellished with patches representing all of his station parishes. Bear traveled the continent, roughly the size of the U.S. and Mexico combined, to visit the stations several times. This M16 magazine came to the museum with an unexpected story brought home from Vietnam by Milwaukee resident Thomas Schmitz. During his first tour of Vietnam in 1968, he was assigned to a sniper ambush team in charge of nighttime patrols. While he normally never wore magazine bandoliers due to the noise they made, giving away the positions at night, one day the base's perimeter was attacked during the daytime. Bandoliers were all that were left for spare ammunition. After a brief firefight, Schmitz returned to his base and realized that there was a bullet hole in one of his pouches. Opening it up revealed that the magazine had been struck while he wore the bandolier. The bullet lodged itself at the top of the magazine, damaging several of the cartridges inside, which very likely saved Schmitz's life. We have a Korean Hershey bar brought back by Deborah K. Sellers of Madison, a Wisconsin National Guard Enlisted Association beer can made by Leinenkugel Brewing Company. It was collected by Dr. James Angler of Madison, Wisconsin. Desert Storm trading cards, Iraqi Army license plate brought back by Oshkosh resident Leland R. Ziebel, 1157th Transportation Company. An Iraqi Coca-Cola bottle by David Cortez of Madison, Wisconsin, from the 32nd Infantry Brigade Combat Team. Kuwaiti McDonald's Happy Meal toy wearing an Iraqi flag, also from David Cortez. A Saudi Arabian Pepsi can from Leland R. Ziebel of Oshkosh. Paul Rand of Racine, Wisconsin, brought back this Neapolitan-style mandolin from France during the First World War. Paulson had its burlap case decorated with over 30 divisional patches and other insignia handmade for him by a local French woman. The side of the body also displays the distinctive red arrow of the 32nd Division. Eventually, in Baghdad, they built a PX in what they called Haji Row. This was a long street full of different vendors that were allowed to come in and sell things to the Americans. During Sergeant Nora Prohaska's extended tours of Iraqi freedom, she found this embossed leathered fan labeled in English showing Saddam Hussein and famous Iraqi sites. She also brought back this lighter that Iraqis sold of the World Trade Center in support of Osama bin Laden, apparently without understanding how offensive it was to Americans. The lighter had twin towers on it and the plane going into them, and a picture of Osama in the corner. When you flick it open, the lighted part where it's supposed to be an explosion on the towers lights up. These pieces represent just a few of the souvenirs Lieutenant Colonel John DeLoop, as he was working with the training team to help advise and mentor the Afghan National Army. A mirrored, embellished Kandahari-style cap, wool pakul with embroidered crown, and a female doll dressed in a burqa. I would like to thank those who have bravely and unselfishly served our country in the armed forces. The Wisconsin Veterans Museum has paid a wonderful tribute to their memories with this display.